Excuse me? Why is a stranger in here? This is absolutely ridiculous. Are you still trying to mooch off us? Leave all your money and get out now. My husband had just passed away, leaving me in a world of grief, and then out of nowhere my sister-in-law and her husband show up. All they could do was spit out these bitter words, painting me as an outsider and a moocher. I've had enough. Spending any more time with people like them is just draining. So I chose to leave the house without uttering a word. As for what the future holds for my sister-in-law and her husband, not a clue. My name's Natalie, a 35-year-old working housewife. Right now I live a peaceful life with my husband Billy and my mother-in-law Paulina. I never really had marriage on my radar, but I agreed to the current setup with the understanding that I could continue working after tying the knot. Billy is always such a sweetheart to me, always making sure I come first. I heard that his father passed away when Billy was just starting middle school, and since then, Paulina has been holding down the fort, raising my husband and his sister on her own. We don't have any kids yet, but I bet bringing them up involves a lot of challenges I can't even begin to imagine. That's why I was worried about Paulina living on her own, so I proposed we should move in together after the wedding. Paulina, what do you think about living with us if you're okay with it? I'll be out during the day for work, so you have plenty of alone time like you're used to. Plus, isn't food always better when there are more people?
Really? To be honest, living alone has been a bit lonely lately.
And just like that, we decided to share a roof. My husband had been worried about his mom living by herself, but he had been bottling up his feelings, not sure if he should suggest we all live together. In the end, we realized neither of our current places were really suitable for the three of us, so we went all in and bought a brand new house and started our life together. We set up Paulina, who has weak legs, on the first floor, and we took the second floor as our bedroom. Living with her turned out to be way more comfortable than I had imagined, and it didn't stress me out one bit. In fact, she taught me how to cook, and even helped me with cleaning, which isn't really my strong suit. I was grateful for everything. Paulina, thank you so much for cooking for us every day. But don't push yourself too hard. We're going to be living like this for a long time, and if you burn yourself out now, it might be tough down the line.
What are you saying? I'm living with you, so let me at least do this. If I don't, I'd feel like I'm freeloading, and I can't stand that.
Our household was always filled with these lively exchanges between us. At first, my husband was nervous about potential mother-in-law and daughter-in-law disputes, but seeing us getting along so well, he was able to fully concentrate on his work without any worries.
Natalie, thank you for getting along so well with my mom. I will work even harder to make you happy.
Even though I already have all the happiness I need, he always makes such promises. I'm already over the moon with joy because I have you and your mom. If I got any greedier, I'm afraid I might jinx it. I hoped that these peaceful days would never end. That was my wish. But such peaceful and happy life didn't last long. About 6 months after we started living together, I noticed that Paulina was acting a bit off. Is something bothering you, Paulina? If you have any worries, I'm all ears. My mother-in-law, who was clearly feeling down, was hesitant at first, but after a while she started opening up.
Well, Susan and Harry have started dropping by almost every day, and they said they were short on cash, so they took money from my purse, and they even raided the fridge. They're treating this house like their own.
What? It turned out that my sister-in-law and her husband were making themselves at home during the day while my husband and I were at work. I had met them once before we got married and then at the wedding, and I remember they came off as a bit intense. My sister-in-law Susan, who looked me up and down as if she was sizing me up, remarked,
"So this is the type of woman Billy is into. I wouldn't have guessed. She's pretty ordinary, isn't she? She blends into the background so much. If I were a man, I wouldn't look twice at her." she just blurted out such words. I had heard from my husband that he had a pretty wild sister, but I didn't think she'd be this bad. And despite being over 40, she doesn't hold down a steady job and just does as she pleases. No wonder Paulina was taken aback.
She's been like this for years. Even when I scolded her in the past, she never listened. If you're saying it's because of how I raised her, I agree. It's all my fault.
No, that's not true. You're not at fault, Paulina. It's a problem when adults act selfishly and cause trouble for others. I wanted to reassure her, so I said just that. My husband, who heard the story, also seemed quite bewildered.
So my sister is still causing trouble. She's a real piece of work. I thought she'd mellow out a bit after getting married, but it seems to have done the exact opposite.
He sighed deeply and his shoulders slumped. From what I gathered, it sounds like Susan's husband Harry isn't much of a go-getter either. Seems like he prefers a carefree lifestyle, taking on odd jobs when he feels like it, and not keeping any steady employment. Maybe that's why he's always scraping by, complaining about being broke and hungry. Little did I know, my husband had attempted to knock some sense into them multiple times in the past. But they didn't take heed, and so the time just kept passing by. Paulina didn't want them traipsing through our new house, so she tried making up all sorts of reasons, but their pushy attitude was just too much for her to handle.
In 3 days, it's payday and they'll surely come knocking. I really wish to stop them this time,
she stated, wearing a stern expression that was unusual for her. My husband contemplated taking a day off to confront them, but sadly, he's buried in work at the moment. He's so swamped, he can hardly catch a break. So I'll stick around with you instead. Gotta be better than leaving you to deal with them alone, right? If they start yakking about money, I'll step up, I suggested. And so, we started to carefully strategize our response. Then right on cue, 3 days later, Payday Friday rolled around, and they strolled in as we were making lunch.
Hey Mom, we're home. We're famished. Got anything good? Anything will do, just rustle up some lunch, okay?
Wait, why is Natalie here? Are you supposed to be working? I took a day off to hang out with your mom. But hang on a second. You just said we're home like it's your place. That's a bit odd, don't you think? I couldn't hold back my frustration at their audacious behavior. It's super weird to barge in announcing we're home, isn't it? And then to have the gall to ask her to whip up a meal for them. Just knowing that they've been treating our home like their personal pantry while we're not around really grinds my gears. But no matter what I say, my brassy sister-in-law just brushes it off. She even has the cheek to fire back at me.
What are you on about? Putting on airs. Remember where you stand. You're only living here because of my brother. You dare to speak to me like that? If you've got time to argue, you better start preparing our lunch.
Her antics left me stunned, and Paulina looked completely dejected. After that, Susan did as she pleased, raided our fridge, and even walked out with a bag full of groceries. Familiarity shouldn't be an excuse for disrespect. This episode made me realize my sister-in-law and her husband completely missed that point. At least with me being present, they didn't broach the subject of money. That was a small consolation. When my husband got back from work and I briefed him on the day's events, he was seething.
I'll set them straight. I won't let them run rampant anymore. I've reached my limit.
His face was flushed with an unusual intensity. Paulina kept apologizing, saying, "I'm sorry for all the trouble." But I reassured her it wasn't her fault, and we discussed a bunch of things until we felt a bit better. Following that day, my husband put his foot down, and their uninvited visits ceased, and Paulina began to regain her usual spirit.
Just when I thought we three could get back to our peaceful life, about a week later, I got a phone call at work. All right, I'm heading there right now. My thoughts just blanked out. Turns out my husband suddenly gripped his chest in pain at work and was rushed to the hospital. His coworkers said he was unconscious by the time he was transported, and they were giving him chest compressions. With my hands shaking and voice trembling, I quickly dialed Paulina. Paulina, it's awful. Billy has...
Billy? Alright, I'm hailing a cab right now and heading to the hospital.
She was also quick to dash off to the hospital. We each jumped in a taxi and raced to the designated hospital. We agreed to meet up at the hospital's general info desk and were then escorted to the room. But by the time we got there, my husband had already passed away. The doc let us know that he seemed to have passed peacefully, as though he were asleep.
He was already in cardiac arrest when he was brought in. We did everything we could, but I'm sorry.
He had died from a sudden heart attack. We were stunned by the sudden turn of events. The only solace was that my husband's face looked peaceful, as if he was simply taking a nap. He looked ready to wake up at any moment and ask,
Good morning, what's for breakfast today?
He wore such a tranquil expression. While mourning my unexpectedly departed husband, Paulina and I got to work on the funeral arrangements. Many people from his workplace, along with friends and acquaintances, showed up to pay their respects. The warmth at the funeral made it clear how much he had touched people's lives. Everything was so chaotic, neither Paulina nor I had the time to grieve properly. As time wore on, we had to confront the harsh reality and ended up spending our days crying together. There were no issues in his regular checkup. It's such a shame. If I had paid more attention to his health, this might not have happened.
What are you talking about? Natalie, you did more than anyone could have expected.
She and I continued to lift each other up. I was struggling to bounce back and ended up taking a break from work, staying home for a while. But amidst all this, another unexpected incident happened. This was about a month after my husband's sudden passing. Unexpectedly, our doorbell rang and Susan and her husband showed up. She looked at me and spat out,
Excuse me? Why is a stranger in here? This is absolutely ridiculous. Are you planning to mooch off us? Leave all your money and get out now.
She just let that rip. I was totally taken aback. Even her husband chimed in.
You're not thinking of staying in this house, are you? You and Paulina are practically strangers. I think it's best if only blood relatives live together from now on. So please leave as soon as you can.
That's what he told me. The next thing I know, a moving truck pulls up, and the couple declared they were moving in, laughing heartily.
We're excited about living here. Just us family.
In the throes of mourning my late husband, they showed zero empathy, only seeking to evict me from the house. I couldn't let this slide. They were throwing insults, calling me a freeloader and an outsider. I'd reached my limit. Engaging with these people wasn't worth my time. I made up my mind to leave the house. While I was packing my things in my room, Susan gushed.
What's up? Feeling blue you can't stay in this house? I know being a widow's tough, but you've got to hang tough. You're younger than me, you'll manage somehow.
That's what she said. I disregarded her words, didn't make eye contact, and left the house. Obviously, I have no clue what happened to them after that. The first place I headed after walking out of that house in silence was, of course, the real estate agent. It was to quickly put up for sale the house and property that Susan had usurped. There was no mortgage to pay off, and if I could get the paperwork done, I could wash my hands of the two. That was my plan. I had a gut feeling about this, so I had made various preparations just in case things went south. I had mapped out various escape routes for Paulina to get away from her daughter, and just in case, I had even secured a potential new place. Susan and her husband probably planned to live off Paulina's savings, but I wasn't about to let them have their way. Even if there's no blood bond, I decided to take care of my mother-in-law for the rest of her life. Paulina announced she was going shopping and dropped by my place. Paulina, let's stay at this hotel until our new place is ready. It's gonna be a bit tight. We'll be sharing a room for a while, but bear with me, okay?
I'm not worried about that, but do you think we'll be alright? Those kids might start tailing us again.
She was visibly nervous, but I kept reassuring her. Don't sweat it. I won't let them push us around anymore. Things were quiet for a while, but sure enough, about a month later, they contacted us in a flurry.
Hey, what's going on? We've been kicked out. This is Billy's house. No, it's in Mom's name, right? You can't just kick us out now.
As anticipated, she was all shaken up. The counterattack finally begins here. Well, that house has been in my name since I bought it. I have no plans of living with you guys, and if I can't live there, there's no point in keeping the property, so I sold it. We've already found a buyer, and we're waiting for you guys to vacate, so please leave as soon as you can. When I broke the news in a composed tone, she was totally taken aback.
But even if you suddenly tell us to leave, we have nowhere to go. We're unemployed, and we have debts. It's too harsh to just yank away our place to live.
Excuse me? I was baffled by what she was saying. After all, she had thrown me out in the same manner just a month ago. But I was evicted from that house that day too. Remember? You said something like, when will you stop mooching off other people? But I left without a fuss, didn't I? Why don't you guys just check into a hotel or something?
I'm telling you, we don't have any money. Where are you right now? You're with Mom, aren't you? Let me talk to her. Otherwise, we won't be able to survive.
I don't know the extent of their debt, but judging by their desperation, I figured they must be significantly in the red and already being hounded by debt collectors. That's not our problem. If I may be so blunt, could you stop pestering Paulina? We're aware. You've nearly drained all of her savings. Please stay out of her lives from this point forward.
How can you be so heartless?
Susan, who was so brazen just a moment ago, must have realized the gravity of the situation after hearing my words. From there, the situation devolved into her crying like a toddler and starting to apologize. In a mix of frustration and compassion, Paulina let out a sigh and reluctantly began to address her daughter.
Susan, if you think you can continue to lean on me, you're sorely mistaken. Remember using all of your dad's life insurance to pay off your debt? You promised you wouldn't repeat that, but you've hardly worked and gambled again, haven't you? I'm done. Don't ever reach out to me again. What? Mom! Don't say that. Don't be so harsh.
We could hear her tear-choked voice on the other end of the line, but Paulina ended the call abruptly.
Natalie, let's block her number. It'll be a nuisance if she keeps hounding us. She clearly doesn't intend to change her ways. So annoying.
She vented her frustration. Paulina, who had previously been racked with fear and anxiety, now had a revitalized look on her face, maybe because she finally got to say what she needed to say. After that, when my sister-in-law realized that I had blocked her number, she went into overdrive trying to reach us. She called Paulina, tried to get through on my late husband's still active phone, and was relentless. Since we had zero intentions of handing over our new address and any further talks were just draining, both Paulina and I blocked her on WhatsApp and set our phones to reject her calls. Stubborn as she was, Susan even went to our relatives, broadcasting her woes left and right, pleading for financial help. However, all our relatives, clued in on her past gambling debts, seemed to have chosen to turn a deaf ear to her pleas. After being booted out, she and her husband found themselves without a roof over their heads. They resorted to day jobs to get by and spent their nights in a park until they could secure an apartment. They had been so high and mighty before, but look at them now. It's a sorry sight. At this stage, Paulina and I have no plans to lend them a helping hand, no matter what. We're just going to sit back and watch them sink into their debt-filled abyss. A month breezed by, and I finally came to terms with the harsh reality of my husband's death and made my way back to work. I had dropped a bunch of weight, and it was causing concern, but now, after work, I return home to my sweet mother-in-law who greets me with a warm smile. It's incredibly comforting. While our living arrangement is a tad unconventional, I want to keep living this pleasant life with her.